He was born in a small fishing village in the Philippines, where life was simple but harsh. His family lived in a fragile wooden hut by the shore, patched up many times to survive the storms. His father went out every dawn to fish, often returning with little, while his mother worked long hours selling vegetables in the crowded market. They barely had enough to eat, but they always had love. From an early age, the boy discovered that singing made him feel alive. He sang in church, at school, and sometimes alone by the sea, his voice rising above the waves like a secret only the sky could hear. But poverty weighed heavily on his shoulders. He wore the same worn-out clothes to school, often walking barefoot on rocky paths, clutching second-hand books that smelled of dust and hope. Other children teased him, saying he was destined to be poor forever. Yet whenever he sang, their laughter faded, replaced by awe they didn't want to admit. Music was his escape, his dream, his prayer. He whispered to himself at night, "One day, I will sing for the world." That day seemed impossible until a teacher noticed his voice and encouraged him to audition for America's Got Talent. The thought was overwhelming. How could a poor boy from the Philippines stand on a stage in America? But his parents, with trembling hearts, believed in him. They sold small things, borrowed from relatives, and managed to secure the trip. His mother stitched together an old shirt so he would look presentable, while his father gave him his blessing with calloused hands on his shoulders. When the day came, he clutched his small bag, boarded a plane for the first time, and whispered a prayer as the engines roared. He was terrified, but he knew this was the chance of a lifetime. The moment finally arrived when he stood backstage at America's Got Talent. The lights were blinding, the cameras moved like giant eyes searching for stories, and the sound of the cheering crowd made his heart pound faster than ever before. He was only a boy from a small fishing village, yet here he was, about to face the world. He looked down at his shoes, old and borrowed, slightly too big for his feet, and felt a surge of nervousness. His hands shook, his throat tightened, and for a moment he wanted to run back. But then he remembered his father's words, "Sing with your heart, Anak, and people will listen." He closed his eyes, took a breath, and stepped out. The stage felt enormous. Bright spotlights blinded him, but he could feel thousands of eyes watching. The judges sat before him, larger than life. Simon leaned forward, studying him with that piercing gaze, while Sophia and Heidi smiled warmly. Howie gave a small nod of encouragement. Simon's voice broke the silence. "What's your dream?" The boy's voice trembled as he answered softly, "To sing. And to make my parents proud." The audience grew quiet, sensing the weight behind those simple words. The music began. At first his voice was fragile, like a whisper carried by the wind. Some in the crowd held their breath, unsure if he could handle the pressure. But then, something shifted. His voice grew stronger, rising higher, filled with emotion that seemed far too deep for someone his age. He poured his struggles, his hunger, his dreams into every note. His eyes glistened under the lights, and each word carried the story of a boy who had nothing but dared to dream everything. By the second verse, silence swept the room. All doubts were gone, this was no ordinary performance. As the boy reached the middle of the song, the atmosphere in the theater changed completely. The nervousness that once trembled in his voice was replaced by a power that nobody expected. Each note carried raw emotion, rising from the depths of his struggles and reaching every corner of the hall. The audience leaned forward, captivated, their eyes wide, their hearts pulled into his story without even knowing it. Some people began wiping their eyes, unable to believe that such a small, shy boy could sing with such force and truth. His voice cracked once, but instead of weakness, it revealed a sincerity that only made the moment more powerful. It was not just singing, it was the sound of survival, of love, of hope. When he approached the final chorus, he closed his eyes tightly, clutching the microphone as though it was the only thing holding him up. The long, trembling note he released seemed endless, like he was pouring years of pain and dreams into that one moment. Then it happened. One person stood up, clapping through tears, then another, and within seconds the entire audience rose to their feet in unison. A standing ovation thundered through the theater, echoing louder than the song itself. The boy opened his eyes and froze, shocked at what he saw. Thousands of people on their feet, cheering for him. His lips quivered, his eyes filled with tears, and he whispered a small, "Thank you," into the microphone. The cameras caught every reaction. Heidi pressed her hands against her face in amazement, Sophia shook her head in disbelief, and Howie simply mouthed the word, "Wow." But it was Simon's rare smile, soft yet approving, that carried the weight of the moment. For the boy, this was no longer just a performance. It was proof that even a poor child from the Philippines could move the world with a single song. When the last echoes of his song faded, the theater was still roaring with applause. The boy stood frozen in the center of the stage, his chest rising and falling as tears rolled down his cheeks. He could barely process what had just happened. Then Simon leaned forward, his voice calm but filled with weight. "That," he said, pausing just long enough for silence to fall again, "was unforgettable." The boy's heart skipped. To hear those words from Simon Cowell, the toughest judge of them all, felt like a dream. His hands shook as he held the microphone tighter, trying not to break down in front of the world. But before he could respond, Simon stood up. His hand moved slowly to the golden button on the table. The boy's breath caught in his throat, his eyes widening. The audience gasped, sensing what was about to happen. And then, with one decisive push, Simon pressed the golden buzzer. The sound echoed like thunder, and in an instant, golden confetti burst from the ceiling, raining down in a storm of sparkling light. The boy lifted his hands, staring at the golden pieces falling onto his face and shoulders. It was as if his dreams were literally pouring from the sky. The audience screamed with joy, their cheers mixing with the sound of the music as the golden lights shone on him. Backstage, his mother collapsed into tears, covering her mouth as she whispered, "Anak, you did it, you made it." The boy fell to his knees, overwhelmed. He touched the stage floor with one hand and whispered a small prayer of thanks. He had walked onto this stage as a poor boy with nothing but a song, and now, in front of the world, he was a star. The moment of the golden buzzer became the spark that lit a fire across two nations. Overnight, the boy's performance spread across television screens, social media feeds, and news channels in both the Philippines and the United States. In his small coastal village, families gathered around a single old TV in the town square, cheering and crying as they watched their own local boy showered in golden confetti. Children pointed at the screen shouting his name, while parents whispered to each other that this was proof that even the poorest child could rise if given a chance. His teacher, the one who had pushed him to audition, wiped her eyes and said softly, "I knew the world needed to hear his voice." In America, millions of viewers replayed his audition again and again, moved by the purity of his voice and the depth of his story. Strangers commented, saying his song gave them hope during their own struggles. Filipinos working abroad felt a special pride, sharing the video with the words, "That's one of ours. That's the heart of our people." His story transcended music. It became a message of resilience, sacrifice, and faith. Even years later, his audition was remembered as one of the most touching moments in AGT history. Fans described it not just as a performance, but as a prayer sung out loud. Teachers used it to inspire their students, parents showed it to their children to teach them about dreams. The boy himself, now stronger and more confident, never forgot the night his voice was finally heard. He knew it wasn't only his victory, it belonged to his parents, to his village, to every child who ever felt too small to dream big. His song would never be forgotten, because it had become a song for the world.